and relationships that underpins the public trust, the trust that people have in professionals, the trust that publics have in professionals. And it's important for us to understand the whole concept of trust in the profession and trust in the professionals, because I feel to a large extent the behavior of workers, if it's unprofessional, it can undermine public trust. So professionalism is the consistent demonstration of values, behaviors, and attitudes that earn the trust and respect of others in the workplace. So I want to give you a combined definition of those two. And this is something you can take if you have your notepads and so. So professionalism is the consistent demonstration. I want to emphasize consistent demonstration because it can't be a hit and miss. I'm sure some of you could attest to probably going to your favorite food joint, just discover some brand new place. You might have eaten there and you really enjoyed it. And so you went back the next day because you want that same taste. And when you went back the next day, it didn't taste the same. It wasn't consistent. And we probably make an excuse and say, well, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe there's a different cook today. What professionalism talks about is consistency. We want to know that if we go to a particular place, a particular service we are getting, it's the same high quality delivery every time. So consistency is a big part of professionalism. So it's a consistent demonstration of a set of values, behaviors, attitudes, and relationship that earns the trust and respect of the public, the profession, and others in the workplace. All right. So why then is professionalism important? Why are we even having this conversation today? Why are employers making such a fuss that we want to ensure that we have someone who is considered professional coming into our organization? Well, to answer that question, I'm going to put it back at you. Why do you go to a professional? Because for many of us, we want to ensure that when we go to do some kind of major activity or service, we want a professional to attend to us. So let's look at this example here. Imagine that you just got a foreign use vehicle, all right? Looks brand new. You made a major investment. There's a high installment you have to pay. And so when time for servicing, you want to ensure that you get good quality service. After all, you made a significant investment in this vehicle. So here you have an option of two mechanics. They both graduated from the same institution. They have the same level of training. They have the same level of experience. So they both open up their shops. So tell me, which one of these mechanics will you take your vehicle to? All right. I'll give you a couple seconds. And I'm sure you already have your response. Let me ask the rhetorical question. Where would you take your vehicle? Anyone, just unmute. Let me hear from you.
I'd say the first one.
Most definitely the first one. Could I ask why?
The overall impression of the first picture is clean, neat, very spacious. You can see that things look organized, at least from what I'm seeing.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. And I could imagine that most of you probably have made the same choice. I'll be surprised if anybody chose the second one. And yes, so here's the issue here. They both have the same training, but yet we would choose this one. And if I'm to put a term to it, I would say this looks more professional. That's how I describe it. It looks more organized. I like your word organized. It looks clean. It looks structured. You know, it looks like there's a system at work. So there's a level of organization that communicates to the buyer that there's a level of professionalism in this place. Now, they have the same level of training, but something stands out. That's the value of professionalism. Let me give you one more example. So you have a medical procedure to do. and you're going to a doctor for advice. Again, these two doctors, they've been to the same university, they have the same level of training, they have the same experience. Which doctor will you go to seek advice for a medical procedure? All right. I'm sure most of you have made your answer already. So I'll have one more person just unmute. Who do you go to? Anyone? Some of you still trying to
The
figure out.
first one as well, sir. The first one as well.
Yes.
Definitely.
And tell me, Tisha, why? Why the first one? Why not the second one? They have the same training, the same experience. Why the first one?
Well, the appearance first off, and
Mhm.
then I mean the expression on her face, she still appears to be learning from her textbook. So I would
Right.
say definitely the first one appears, that she knows her thing.
Right. And thank you, Tisha. So it could just be an appearance, but understand how valuable it is for you to appear, how you carry yourself, how you comport yourself is also important in giving off that professional look. So again, they could be just as trained, but more than likely we'll all go to the first one and not the second one. The second one looks a bit confused. She looks unsure. So we more than likely will go to the first one. So that's what professionalism really is. So then we understand then why employers require professionals, because employers want to ensure that there's a level of trust and confidence. When I hire you, my question then is, can you, by your behavior and your interaction with my customers, instill trust and confidence in the organization? I want to know in terms of competence, can you consistently, and again, I want to emphasize consistently, and competently perform the duties and tasks of the job with excellence? I want to know about relationships. Are you able to interact respectfully and effectively with staff and other customers to create a positive experience? I want to know about my reputational risk. If I hire you, will you become a liability to the organization? Would you be drunk on the job? Will you do something that can injure someone? So I will think about my reputational risk. So it's more than just the paper that you graduate with. The paper is the certification. We'll talk a little bit about that shortly. I want to know and have to be convinced by the interview and by my interaction with you that you could present yourself in such a way where I feel comfortable that you have a level of professionalism about you. All right? So professionals are really the gatekeepers of the profession. So members of a profession, they have a responsibility to uphold the standards, the values, the ethics, and the reputation of the field. That's an obligation that you have because you're not representing yourself. Members of a profession, through the professional association, they determine who is qualified to enter. So associations will determine what constitutes acceptable practice. So there's a medical board, there's a medical association, there's a counseling association. And so associations are like the gatekeepers of the profession, trying to ensure that the people who enter this profession, they uphold the standard and the quality of service that depicts that particular profession. So members of a profession, they ought to hold other professionals accountable to protect the public trust and to safeguard your reputation. Because here's what happens. If you are, and I'm just using this example, okay? I'm not making a declarative statement, it's just hypothetical, all right? If you're a teacher and you are frequently absent from school, and when you're there, you are missing classes, you're there on the compound, but you're not teaching, you're not present, um, that child goes home and talk to mommy, mommy, miss didn't come today. What image does that give? You think that that image is just about miss, or does that image have the potential to affect teachers as a profession. And what eventually happens is that sometimes you see professionals get a bad name because of a few people who are not upholding the standards that govern the profession. And so professionals are the safeguard, the gatekeepers to ensure that our reputation doesn't go into disrepute. And so if we are professionals, our conduct can actually strengthen or weaken the standards of others who have gone before us. So let's talk about then, how do we navigate the transition? Coming out of that structured school environment, we want to become professionals within the workspace. How does that in effect happens? And what we're saying here is that your degree, your certification does not make you a professional. Even if arguably you would say, but I did a professional certification. The certification or the qualification you hold, the paper you hold in and of itself does not make you a professional. So professionalism is not a natural progression that comes with the completion of your program or graduating from the university. So for those of you who are graduating, again, I congratulate you. But you're going out there and you're now transitioning. And here's what we mean by a difference between change and transition. The change is the event. It took place at a particular time, November, whatever date you graduated, you walked the aisle, we clapped for you, we celebrated you, that it happened on a specific day. That's the graduation. That's a change. You're no longer a student, you're now a graduate. But to become a professional is an internal transitional process that we go through. And as graduates, we need to actively embrace this process to be transformed into work-ready candidates that the employers are looking for. We must subject ourselves to this internal process in order for us to become professionals within that space. And that involves shifting of a mindset. And so I'm hoping at the end of our session today that there are 3 specific mindsets I want to encourage us to make those mental shifts, because the mindset must come first in order for us to become professional. So professionalism is first a mindset, right? And professionalism as a mindset refers to the internal processes or the way of thinking that shape our attitudes, our decisions, our behaviors, before it manifests itself outward into actions. So you may have heard of people talk about a professional mindset. And so what we're saying is that mental transition that takes place that focuses on the way we think, our attitudes, it helps to shape what our outcome is, the behavior. So it's not just a set of behaviors that we can just check off. Otherwise, I send that to you and I say, okay, do these 5 behaviors and you will be fine. But it's not a checklist or a set of behaviors that we just check off. It really is a mindset that must happen before those behaviors begin to flow. And I'm hoping again by the end of this session, we could start the process of making those mental shifts. All right? Okay. So what is a mindset then? A mindset is the mental lens through which you view yourself, you view others, you view the world, and it influences your decision. And becoming a professional involves adopting this professional mindset. All right, so how are we going to go about that? Here's the first shift I want us to think about. The first mindset shift we want to look at is moving beyond creating an identity to creating a personal brand. Let me stop for a while. That's the first shift I want us to make. We are moving beyond creating an identity to creating a personal brand. So what do I mean by that? Let's talk about identity. Some of you would know of Erik Erikson, his stages of psychosocial development. And what Erik Erikson says is over the 8 different stages, we undergo a conflict between two different things that we are trying to achieve. And at university years, the area in which or the conflict that we are trying to negotiate would be identity versus role confusion. And during that phase, we're trying to understand, who am I? That's the question we're asking. Who am I? What do I stand for? What do I want to become? That's where we are navigating. We may not be conscious of it, but he's saying that during this phase, that's what we're trying to process. That's what we are navigating, trying to find our identity. We are creating an identity. And he's saying if we struggle to create that identity, what we'll eventually experience is role confusion. And role confusion occurs when a person struggles to establish a clear sense of self. He's confused about who he is, what he stands for, what he wants to do in life. So in identity versus role confusion at this stage, look at some of the things we're negotiating. Career choices. And I mean, here we are having this career fair because we are now going through this process where we're exploring our future careers. We're establishing values and beliefs. That's what's happening at this stage. We're exploring different roles. So we had a role of a student, and now we are transitioning into the world of work. There's a role shift that's going to be taking place. Maybe some of you might have functioned as a leader within the school context, whether at the guild level, as a class rep. Some of you might have done internship, practicum, and maybe after here, some of you may work as an OJT, on the job training. So we're going through these different roles we're negotiating. We are going through a period where we are separating our personal identity from our family expectations. Mommy wants this, daddy wants this, and we are trying to navigate and create our own individualized identity and sense of self. That's what's happening at this stage. And we are finding direction and purpose in life. And very importantly, we are creating a sense of belonging through connection with friends, with family. And so at this stage of life, we see the very strong influence of friends, your peers. This is why isolation is so difficult at this stage, because we are trying to create that sense of belonging. But here's what this particular stage employs us. It says, moving beyond this identity creation, we need to come to a place, in addition to that, where we are beginning to differentiate ourselves. So rather than just creating an identity, we are moving beyond creating an identity to differentiating yourself into creating a personal brand. I hope I'm making sense to you. We are creating a personal brand. And your personal brand is not just the sense of belonging and group. What we're saying now, we are actually emphasizing your uniqueness. So your personal brand then is the unique combination of the qualities, the values, your expertise, the behaviors that distinguishes you from your peers. So it's not just being a part of, it is differentiating myself from because of my qualities, my values, my expertise. It distinguishes you from your peers, and it shapes how others perceive you. Now, this is important because when employers are looking at you, they are looking for the person that distinguishes themselves from their peers. 25 of you graduate with the same degree, just around average, same GPA roughly. And as an employer, I could only hire one of you, but I have 25 applications. Who do I choose? On what grounds do I make this decision? And I'm saying what works in your advantage is your ability to differentiate. It goes beyond that belonging to differentiating yourself from the others. That's your personal brand. So your personal brand is essentially what people think when they hear your name. As you graduate, what do your colleagues think about you when they hear your name? Were you the class clown? Were you that person who was the studious type, always in the library studying? Were you the person who will lime and party and then cram overnight and still get the A's? How do others see you? But more importantly, when you go out there in the workplace, how would you be seen by others? That is your personal brand. And we need to protect that because that differentiates you. So let's talk about the professional image within that personal brand. So your personal brand is the image, the reputation, the experience that others associate with you. So the brand image is the packaging of your personal value. The packaging, what others see. How do you look? How do you present yourself? That's the image, your brand image. The way you dress, the way you carry yourself. It shapes how others perceive you. It determines whether others would be able to trust you. The example we looked at with the doctors, again, I said they probably had the same degree, were classmate, graduated with just around the same GPA, but one instilled trust by the way they carried themselves, the way she was dressed, the way she composed herself, and the other one, there seemed to be a level of uncertainty. I'm not sure if I could trust you. Yes, I see a certificate on the wall, but I'm really not so sure. That's the brand distinction. So in marketing, packaging is a powerful communication tool, and it influences consumers' perception and purchasing decision. When you go into the supermarket, you walk down the aisles, you see some stuff on the shelf, several cans of peas. How do you determine which one you choose? Now, some of you would say, okay, I'll look at the price. But I want to suggest even before you reach the price, the way it's packaged, the labeling, the way it's presented on the shelf, that probably caught your eye first. And based on that, you reach out and you pick up. Now, if after doing that, it's too expensive, then you probably put it back and try the one next to it. But more than likely, the packaging is what drew you first. How it looked, how it was presented. So I want you to understand then, if your brand image is your packaging, then we need to be able to pay some close attention to our professional image. Because if your professional image is the packaging and the employer is the consumer, how am I presenting myself on the shelf? How do I look? How am I coming across to this potential consumer, to this potential employer? So let's look a little bit about the attire, and we'll start with the men first. Now, of course, disclaimer, what we're talking about here may not be how you dress on a day-to-day basis at work, because it all depends on where you work. We probably have some engineers on the platform. You probably will have to work with your safety gear. You'll be out on the field. You don't dress in a shirt and tie to go out on the field. But I'm thinking here of the interview. And to a large extent, most of you probably have this down pat. But again, if we're differentiating, there are some little key things for me that stand out. And so I want to share that with you. So firstly, we would say for the men, long sleeve shirt. Not just a dress shirt, it must be long sleeve. Now, I remember when Miss Maxwell had a session, somebody asked, what if I wear a short sleeve? And she said, no short sleeve. Yeah, no short sleeve. There need to be a long sleeve shirt, all right? White t-shirt under the shirt, no print. Now, if you're wearing a dark colored shirt, it doesn't matter if it's white t-shirt or not. But if it's a light color shirt, really you should wear a white t-shirt because it kind of shows through the shirt. And I emphasize no print because I've actually seen people well dressed and you're seeing the print on their t-shirt under their clothes. It's so unprofessional. So no print on your shirt. Of course, dress pants, not sagging, make sure it fits. Shoes clean. This may seem like an obvious thing, shoes clean, but here's what happens. I know it happens to me. I leave home, shoes clean, walk through, a little rainfall, you pick up a little mud somewhere, you didn't realize it, you get to work and guess what? There's a little speck of mud somewhere or there's some grass. So if you don't take time to, before you go into the interview, don't just leave home all well put together and assume that when you walk into the interview, everything, make sure you check yourself, reach a little early, get to the toilet, make sure you wipe your shoes if you need to, walk with something to wipe your shoes if you have to, right? A basic tie without images on it. Keep it simple. This example we have in the picture here is good. As it relates to tie has a particular length. A tie could be too short and a tie could be too long. A tie really is supposed to land just on the tip of your belt. If you look at this image right here, that's where your tie is supposed to be. If the tie goes all the way down to your crotch, it's too long. If it goes higher up above your belt, it's too short. So try to keep your tie, properly aligned. Very important, men, your socks must match your pants or your shoes, not your shirt. If you're wearing a white shirt and a black pants and a black shoes, why are you wearing a white socks? The socks, yes?
Sorry to interrupt. It's just Emmanuel's camera's on, and I don't know if he knows that.
Jesse or Astra, could you check on that for me? Emmanuel, his camera is on.
Thank you for giving me your time. Sorry.
Thank you, Jeannie. That's fine. I'm unable to see Emmanuel here. So
I'm sorry about that. I just need to adjust my phone camera now,
all right.
Sorry
Okay.
about that. I already know done because I have some issues with Wi-Fi now.
It's all right, Emmanuel. It's okay. It's all fine. It's all good, right? So we'll help you out on our side. Could someone probably just take off his camera if we can, right? Good. Right. So I'm making the point, your socks, men, your socks should match your pants or your shoes, not your shirt. Please don't do that. Dress belt. Don't have dress shirt, dress pants, and please have a leather belt, a dress belt, and it must be sized. Other people don't realize belts have a size. So sometimes some people, the belt doesn't fit and you take an ice pick and you bore a hole and it fit now. No, it's too long. The belt is supposed to really stop right to the front of your waist. If it goes around your waist, all the way around your waist, your belt is too long. Of course, shave, neat beard, neat hairstyle. Good hygiene. Avoid excessive cologne. There is a limit to cologne. Don't put too much. All right. And that's basically it. And I'm sure most of you already have that covered. All right. Let's look at the attire for the woman. Pretty simple. We're saying a blouse, a button-up shirt, a professional top of some kind. You can wear a jacket of some kind. You don't have to, but there's professional work jackets you can use for an interview. Dress pants, tailored skirt, conservative dress. Avoid tight clothing. Avoid short skirts. It doesn't send a good signal in an interview. Preferably closed-toe flats, or if you have heels, low heels, but closed-toe is preferred as opposed to open-toe shoes. That's a small adjustment that want to encourage the ladies to make. And again, you may say, but why does that even make a difference? The truth is, I've sat on interview panels, and trust me, it takes 3 seconds before an image, some kind of impression is formed. As you walk through the door, before you have a seat, before you even properly articulate good morning, some measure of impression is already formed of you. And so these little things may seem pretty simple and probably in your mind insignificant, but it determines how you stand out to the interviewers at the time, right? Okay, here, neat and professional, no bright colored hair. Leave that for, weekends and get it out before. Avoid heavy perfume as well. Natural makeup, minimal, not too much. It's good to keep it very minimal. The bright colored lipstick, keep it minimal. Jewelry, simple, not distracting. We don't want to hear you bend the corner with your bracelets before we see you. That kind of has a negative taste. And of course, your nails, moderate style. I mean, that's not the time to bling out the nails when you're going for an interview. All right. Pretty simple. All right. So similar to your presence, your physical presence, your digital presence also reflects that personal brand. So we're still talking about the packaging, and your digital presence also reflect the packaging. Your presence online is the digital representation of who you are. And Ms. Maxwell also mentioned when she was on that interviewers, they actually go online and they search you up. They look through your socials and they get a good sense of who you are even before you enter into the interview, right? So a question you need to ask yourself is, how is your presence reflecting your personal brand, right? So your online, I think Alana has a hand up. Alana?
Hi, good afternoon, sir. Just a question. That image that you would have had before of the woman on the screen, was
Yes.
that an example of how to dress or how not to dress?
That's a good question. I'll be honest with you, it wasn't the best example, and I would like to hear your take on it.
Well, I was thinking it was an example of how not to dress
And tell me why.
because I'm seeing jeans, I'm seeing a frayed hemline, I'm seeing a jersey, I'm seeing the jersey seems to be tied or something, but
Is it
it's
tied?
not, it's not, it's not, if you look at it, it's not tucked into her pants. Let's go there.
All right.
So there is some sort of uneven finish at the waistline. It seems as though it's tied or it's tucked in some way to create a style, but I'm definitely seeing a frayed hemline. So that had me a little concerned there. So hence the
Okay.
reason why I'm asking. Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. And I agreed it wasn't the best image. I had a different image before, but I had to be mindful of copyright on images. And so this image wasn't the best one, I agree. But I hope that at least the information I gave with respect to how to present yourself was relevant and useful. All right? But thank you for your observation and your sharing. So we're saying your online presence, it reflects that personal brand. Is there another? Okay, Alana, thank you. Your online presence reflects that personal brand, and the online presence acts as a digital resume or portfolio, and it gives employers a window into your lifestyle, your habits, your values, your character. I mean, if every time, every picture you with some alcohol somewhere, and I'm not knocking if you're a drinker, but if I'm hiring you as an engineer and I know that in our area there's a no drug policy, and safety is so important within this space, I will be a little concerned that every image, alcohol seemed to be the central figure within the image. So I'm just saying, be mindful that what you put up online can give a sense into your habits, into your lifestyle. And depending on where you're applying and what you're doing, it may not give the best representation of the personal brand that you want to present. Keep in mind, we are talking about developing a personal brand. And always ask yourself, is this the brand that I want to present to those outside there? Is this the proper representation of who I want to show myself as a professional? All right. So that's the first shift we want to make. And before we move to the second one, I'll be open for any questions at this point. Any questions? Moving beyond creating identity to creating a personal brand. Yes, I'm hearing someone. Emmanuel, yes?
Okay, when we make digital representation, right, that means everything down to like Facebook and Instagram, and everybody will be like checking to see like what they really offer to the job in this case.
They look at all your socials. So
Okay.
if it's Facebook, if it's Instagram, whatever socials you have, they actually go search you up and
Okay.
see what comes up. And they do check it out. So yes, I would say, do a little audit of your own, online presence. Google yourself, check your thing, see what's up there. And the thing is, it may not even be something that you, a picture of you per se, but it might be something that you liked or you forwarded. It could be somebody else comment that you, and you kind of liked it, but it could have been something derogatory, something, deflammatory. All of these things are important in terms of what happens in that space. So, once it's out there in the public, they are going to take a look at it. So I'm just saying, be mindful of.
Oh, that's why they say the internet is forever. I understand that
Yeah.
now.
Yes. Yes. So whatever you could scrub, please do. And always think about, your digital presence is reflecting your personal brand, and ask yourself, is this how I want to be seen as a professional? Does it reflect me as a professional? All right. Thank you for your question, Emmanuel. Anybody else before we move on?
Thanks, sir.
You're welcome. On your personal brand?
Question, sir.
Yes.
What about no digital presence at all? Is
Right.
that a problem as well?
Well, I think Miss Maxwell talked a little bit about that. One of the things that employers will seek to do is, again, check to see if there's a digital presence. And she recommended that maybe you should create a professional presence. LinkedIn, if you've done stuff that is credible and noteworthy, you probably want to present those things. So you're creating a positive brand of yourself out there. In fact, the takeaway was that if you didn't have one, maybe it's worth creating and putting up. But however, it's not going to be an indictment against you if there isn't a digital presence. I'll be very honest with you. I don't have a digital presence. I don't have any socials at all. So it's not an indictment if you don't have a presence, but it could also be an advantage to you if you create a positive presence and allow that to be a brand that you put out there. So I hope that answered the question. All right. Is there another before we make the shift? We shift in gears. Okay, no other questions. All right, let's move on. So the second mental shift I want us to consider is moving beyond knowing to being. Moving beyond the knowing to being. And what we're talking about here is developing a professional identity. So let's see.
Question,
Yes, Jesse.
Doctor, if you have a question in the chat, I wanted to read before you move on to
Sure.
this topic, right? In terms of professional attire for women, is it okay to wear open-toe shoes?
Right. I was saying that closed-toe shoes would be the preferred way to present yourself for an interview. Now, after you've gotten a job, you will figure out what the culture is within the organization, what the policies are, because the policies in some offices now, banks and some others, they don't encourage open-toe shoes in some of these organizations. So I'm saying for the interview, it's recommended that you go closed-toe shoes. All right. After the interview, the workspace may be a little less stringent, and you'll be able to gauge the culture of the organization, and maybe open-toe might be fine in that setting. But for the interview, preferably closed-toe. All right. Is that it, Jesse? Any other questions there?
Yes, but one more question.
Sure.
Would you recommend men wear a suit, or is a tie and shirt appropriate?
Tie and shirt is more than enough. A suit might be an overkill. If you're applying for a very senior position, a manager of some kind, maybe a suit might be appropriate in a case like that. But generally speaking, a suit may be a little much, depending on the position that you're applying for. Shirt and tie is perfectly fine. So I would stay away from the suit again, unless it's a very senior position that you're applying for, then a suit might be expected. But if not, suit is a overkill, I would think.
And one other question, someone asked, can you elaborate on the term conservative dresses in the workplace?
Conservative dresses?
Yeah.
So we would say business casual, a tailored type dress of some kind. So it wouldn't be something that you would wear to go out, to a party or so. And I really wish I had done a little better in terms of giving you an image. And thank you. I think it was Alana that pointed it out. But there are dresses that are tailor made. You have, I don't want to call the name of the store, but okay, let me do. Stores like J&K, they really do cater for women in the workplace. And so you would see the type of dresses and so that they would have in some of those stores that really represent how a woman should dress. So I'm saying the dress should be something that you would wear and consider business wear, and not something you'll wear as for, an evening gown or something you'd wear to go out in some other function. It's basically business wear we're talking about. So a dress that is suited for business wear. And again, I apologize for not having an image, but I could show that to you. It probably would help to make it a little simpler if you could have seen it. All right. Is that it, Jesse? That's it, Jess? Okay, we lost Jesse. All right, so let's move on. So we're talking about moving beyond knowing to being. And let's see if we could just kind of explore this area a little bit more. So we're saying here, and this is very, very important, professionalism goes beyond acquiring knowledge to applying that knowledge in ways that create value, that builds trust, that produce results. The knowledge, the certification is the entry point and not the end in itself. The application of that is where it matters. That is where the competence begins to show up, and that is the gateway to creating this professional identity that you will be known for. So the acquisition of knowledge is just the beginning of the process. The goal is becoming the professional practitioner in your field. I just said that, right? So professionalism is what enables a person to turn the expertise into excellence and competence into trust. So it involves the application of that information, of that knowledge. There are people who are highly qualified in terms of the paper that they have, but they don't show up on the job. I wanted to give an example, but I thought I should just pull that example back. It's the ability to transform the knowledge into responsible solution-based activity. Have you ever encountered, let me ask you, have you ever encountered people who, they've met the qualification because the qualification of the job might have required a master's degree or some higher level qualification. So by virtue of the fact that they have the job, that they would be the holder of some kind of higher level certification. But yet, your interaction with them, they seem to be very unprofessional, or they lack the level of competence that you would think goes with the certification. And that's an example that the certification in and of itself doesn't translate into competence or professionalism. Professionalism is the process that we undergo to become professionals. All right. So knowledge must be transformative. Knowledge must be transformative. Just a second here. Right. It is not merely something we possess. It is something that changes us on the inside and shapes how we think, how we act, and how we relate to others. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, Are we being transformed by our knowledge? We've spent 4 years, 3 years doing a particular certification. You finished your degree. Most of you are graduating at the end of year, and congratulations again to you. The question you need to ask yourself is, how has this experience transformed me as a person? That's an important question to ask. Professionalism occurs when the knowledge is integrated into one's identity, value, and daily actions. So when we apply the competence that the knowledge we have gained, it manifests itself into competence. Of course, that in itself is a process, because it means when you go into the workspace, you get to build the skill sets. Many of you, even though you have the information, you don't have a wealth of practice, I mean, outside of internship and so. But as you begin to apply in your workspace and you begin to grow in competence and you build your skill sets, and so you begin to become that consummate professional in that field. So it's a process. It's not something that happens immediately. But there's a significant difference between knowledge and competence. I want to take a little time to look at them here. So we're saying that knowledge is the formal credential, the ability, versus the competence, which is the ability to perform the tasks. I'm sorry. The knowledge is gained through education, whereas the competence is through the practical experience of being on the job. The knowledge, it is met by the academic requirement, okay? The competence is the application of it. The focus of the knowledge is what was learned, whereas competence is the ability to do. Knowledge is measured through exams and tests, quizzes. We measure your knowledge. Okay, you know this. When it comes to competence, how do you now apply it through performance? And this is a very important one for me. Knowledge exists in declarative memory, whereas competence exists through procedural memory. Let me see if I could quickly explain that. So declarative memory, you learn something, you learn some facts, you learn formula, you learn, definitions. These things go into, we have different types of memory, right? You have episodic memory, you have declarative, you have procedural, different types of memory. And the knowledge that you have through schooling and learning, it goes into this declarative memory. But here's the challenge with it. These are things that you can forget if not used very easily. I've seen situations where students may pass an exam, but I hazard a guess that if that same exam would be given 2 months later, I'm not so certain that you might get the same grade, because some of what you might have learned for that exam, you might have forgotten. And of course, sometimes it's the strategy that we are using. A lot of people are cramming now. A lot of people are focusing only on what they need to know for the exam. We call that teaching to the test or learning just for the test. If the textbook has 30 chapters and you know the exam coming from 10, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to just learn the 10. You're not going to read the other 20 chapters. In fact, you might consider that wasting time. But is it? Because, and we'll touch a little bit on that in a little while. If we are becoming professionals, the goal here is not just to gather knowledge. If you're going out there to be a professional in the field, we want to be able to understand the full range, to build your competence to do. So if you just learn 10 chapters out of the 30, then that's just 30%, really, 33% of what you need to be competent within the field. So declarative memory allows us to forget. Formula, we learned that. Probably can't remember it now. Stuff you learned in year 1, you may not remember That's declarative memory. Procedural memory, on the other hand, when you do something repeatedly, it goes into procedural memory. And procedural memory, if I'm to give you by way of example, is like riding a bike. And you would hear people say, once you learn to ride a bike, you will never forget how to ride a bike. You ever hear people say that? That's what procedural memory really looks like. So when you learn something and you have the knowledge and you build that knowledge through application now into competence, and there is repeated, that's why the continuation is so important. There's repeated execution of those tasks over a period of time. You build a level of competence that reside within procedural memory that you can almost do without thinking. It becomes almost like second nature to you because you have done that so many times before. You don't have to think it through and use working memory to figure out what comes next. It just comes natural because of doing. That's what procedural memory can look like. So when we think of that professional competence that's necessary, we look at this example from Tim Saunders. He says, education without application is just entertainment. And he's emphasizing the importance of the application of what we know. Knowledge, when continuously applied, is what leads to professional competence. All right. So there are two aspects of professional competence. There's the technical competence. Well, there are two aspects that I am presenting to you today. There's the technical competence, and then there is the professional conduct. Let's look at the technical competence. It's the body of knowledge and skills gained that are required to perform the task and the ability to apply that knowledge accurately, adapted to real-world situations and problems. And then there's the professional conduct. That's part of professional competence. It's the ethical standards, the behavioral expectations, the interpersonal practices that guides how professionals carry out their work and relate to others within the professional setting. Both are very important. There are some people who are very highly technically competent. They know the work. They are the people who, if something is difficult, call this guy, call this person. She knows what to do. She has the technical competence. But sometimes the challenge may be with the professional conduct. You just can't seem to get along with people at all. There's always conflict. There's always some kind of an argument. There's always some kind of challenge as it relates to interpersonal relationships. Or maybe it's the kind of person that struggles to work within a team setting. So I can work very well on my own, have the technical competence, give me what I need to do, I'll go get it done. When you tell me now I have to work with with a group of people, I struggle to function within that space. So maybe that level of working within teams might be a challenge within the professional conduct that you struggle with. But these are expectations within the work context, and we'll probably get to some of those things a little later. I want to focus on the continuous learning as part of the technical competence. And I want to say that as much as we celebrate having graduated, the learning doesn't end. In fact, I want to say to you, it has just begun. The learning does not end. For me, this is one of the hallmarks of professionalism. When I think of professionals, I think of people who are continuous learners because the dynamics continue to change. Years ago, I had a mechanic who was a top mechanic in working with carburetor vehicles. Well, you probably know by now, I don't know if you could even buy a carburetor vehicle. Maybe some kind of second-hand vehicle somewhere down the line. But they don't make carburetor vehicles anymore, not to my knowledge. Vehicles has changed. So it has gone fuel injected, and then it morphed into hybrid, and then you have now electrical vehicles. And the person who was top of the line carburetor mechanic who has not engaged in continuous learning, you have just made yourself incompetent within the workspace because technology has gone ahead of you and you have not moved. That's an example of the power of continuous learning. And what professional organizations do, they insist that people within that profession, in order to keep your credentials, you must have continuous learning. One of the organizations that I'm a part of, I have to do 96 professional development hours every 3 years. And I have to submit all the courses I did, all the hours I accomplished within that 3-year period. Otherwise, I lose my certification. And I have to reapply, do over the exams, go through the entire process all over again. Now, why would professional organization insist on that? Because they want to ensure that those who are part of the profession, they remain on the cutting edge. Because as new research comes out, there are changes within the field. And if you are not changing or abreast with what's happening, you are going to be left behind and your technical competence will be compromised. It was Mark Twain that said, I have never let my schooling interfere with my education. And I want to encourage you, don't let the schooling interfere with your education. You have finished university. Maybe for some of you, you may go on to do higher level. Maybe some of you may not. But I'm saying continue educating yourself. Continuous education is the ongoing process of acquiring, updating, refining the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes throughout one's career in life, and it's throughout one's career. It is the voluntary, so nobody forces you, except you're part of a professional organization that says you could lose your practice if you don't. It's a voluntary, it's self-motivated pursuit of knowledge and skills. But here's the interesting thing about it. It doesn't have to necessarily be formal. Continuous learning involves actively seeking opportunities to learn and grow, both professionally and personally, and goes beyond formal education. So it doesn't have to necessarily be where I'm now looking for some institution. Of course, if you have additional certification that could supplement and complement what you have, sure, go ahead, do it. But it's not limited to just formal education. It includes learning from experience. That's validated continuous education right there when you learn from your experience and from the experiences of others. Professional development courses, I mentioned that before. I have to do quite a number of those. Every 3 years, I have to do 96 hours of professional development courses every 3 years. So you have that type of continuous learning. You have feedback from others, you could have done this a little differently. And so based on the feedback, you're able to make adjustments. And guess what? You come out better next time. And I've seen students do that. You do a presentation, let's say for class, and you get some feedback from class. And when you go back next time, you make the adjustments and it comes out a little better. So there's learning taking place. So you can get feedback from others. There's self-reflection and practice. You can do your own self-reflection and ask yourself, what could I have done differently? And of course, self-directed study. You could choose to pursue on your own some measure of research. There's no shortage of information, no shortage of information. The internet has made that accessible to us. So just about anything under the sun, in your own field, you can find valuable information that you can read, you can listen to, you can watch some instructional videos. You keep yourself continuously developing and growing within your field. Right, Tisha, I see your hand.
Yes, sir. Now with regards to what you're speaking about here in terms of professional development, like apart from what you're doing, like for example, how you're saying that you have to do additional courses. Let's say that if you're doing certain courses, it will be easy to, show the certification for it. But if it is an instance where we are taking on like self-reflection and practice, like you mentioned, or self-directed study, how can we show, this, like the benefits then that will somehow
Right.
help the
That's a very good question. Now, not everything requires certification per se. Because, okay, let's say, for example, the entry requirement for the job is, let's say, a bachelor's in whatever area of study. And you have met that requirement with the bachelor's in that study. So you're in the job. Now, the job may say to you, continuous education may be one of the things that they focus on. What some organizations may do is you may not get a certificate, you may get a certificate of participation. Oh, no, it's different from a certificate where you complete a course and so forth, right? Sometimes a certificate of participation just means that you're a part of the program, but you still benefit from the learning. But there wasn't necessarily an assessment involved where we test you and you must get 80%. And if you get 80%, then you get the certification signed off by the director, as the case may be. There's some programs will not give you that. But if you're talking about building your technical competence, I could learn something. I don't get certification for it, but it helps me to be more effective on my job. And all of it not all of it might be direct hard skills. Some of it could be softer skills that can help. So I mentioned the person who struggles with interpersonal relations, with team and so forth. I might be able to do some courses on interpersonal relations. I may not get a certificate for it, but guess what? It helps me to communicate better within my job. Helps me to work better with my colleagues. Maybe I might do something on leadership. I didn't get a certificate per se, but when placed in a leadership position, or I'm acting or I'm doing some kind of a leadership emergent role, I can use the learnings I got and be competent within that particular area. So I would say to you, don't negate learning, continuous learning, if it doesn't necessarily give you a certification. Of course, if you can get one, take it, go for it. But it only adds value if you can get that. But if you can learn, if you have access to learning within, whether self-directed or through other means, that could hone your skills, could sharpen your skills, could fine-tune the way you do what you do, it is only going to benefit you within your workspace. So I recommend go for it. I hope that answered the question. Yeah.
answer? Yes, it did.
All right. Is there another before we move on? Okay. All right, let's go to professional conduct. Now, we might assume that an area like this is very obvious. That can be an assumption that we can make. Someone has the technical competence, we just can assume, okay, this person should know what to do. That may not be a good assumption to make. Professional conduct in the workplace refers to the behaviors, the attitudes, the communication styles, and the ethical standards expected in a professional environment. Expected in a professional environment. So organizations don't leave it up to you to determine based on your own subjective evaluation what is professional conduct. So in order to standardize it, they have something called a professional code of conduct. Okay? And upon entering the job, you get a copy of the professional code of conduct that you have to read and internalize and adhere to. Because they're saying maybe in your culture or in some other culture, maybe the organization you came from, there's certain things that were acceptable. They're saying in our organization, this is the level of conduct we expect from you. And it's written within this particular code of conduct, right? So that code of conduct is the foundational framework outlining the ethical principles. It outlines the values that we hope to see from you. It outlines the behavioral standards that we expect to see from you in the organization. That's the code of conduct. Now, it also helps to navigate workplace dilemmas and uphold the company's values, right? And a dilemma might be where, you have two competing things going on and which one the code of conduct helps to give guidance to that. What does the code of conduct say? What should you do in a situation like that? The code of conduct can be a guide in terms of what you do. So let's take a closer look at it. And I'm going to look at just a few. This can be, code of conduct is usually a pretty heavy document within organizations. I'll just emphasize a few critical ones. So attendance and punctuality. Now, we assume that attendance and punctuality is something that everybody should understand is important within organizations, but apparently it's not. Some cultures are a little more lax, and because the culture is a little lax, you might have developed a practice of coming to work late, taking days, and that might be a normal thing within that culture. But some organizations do play. One of the organizations I used to work for many years ago, I had to be at work for 7:45. That was the time, 7:45. And if you clocked your card at 7:45, technically you're late. And you're considered late technically. Now, they wouldn't mark you as late, but technically you're late because you're expected to start work at 7:45. But if you are at 7:45, now clocking your card, now go and put on your bag, now coming to log on your computer, that'll take you an extra 10 minutes. You basically starting work at 7:55. That's how they looked at it. All right. And in that organization, if you were 5 minutes late, you were written up. Well, before you're written up, you would have been, I think you had like 2 or 3 times for the month. You couldn't cross that. Being more, 5 minutes, that's it, 5 minutes. And if that happened, you could get a letter at the end of the month. I mean, punctuality was important. So what punctuality then? Effective time management shows that you respect your commitments and you demonstrate personal integrity. What they're basically saying is when you sign the contract, we said to you, this is the hour of work, you agree to it, and this is what we expect from you. All right? So that's important to understand the culture within the organization. Now, attendance and punctuality is not limited to just coming into work. It also includes coming back from breaks and lunch period, because you might come to work on time, go out to lunch, and you're over by 15 minutes from lunch. Those things are also important as well in terms of time, punctuality, and attendance. There's something I want to add quickly here, and it's something that's called presenteeism as opposed to absenteeism. I'm not sure if you all ever heard the term presenteeism. So absenteeism, of course, we know is when you miss a day, you're absent from work. And if it happens too often, we talk about absenteeism. Presenteeism is really it's like when you are at work, you're still absent. So there are people that come into work, check in, clock their card. So they're physically on the plant, they're physically on the compound, but they're not really functioning within their workspace. They're missing from their workstation. That's an example of what presenteeism looks like. That is also a breach of conduct. All right. Very important, phone and social media use. We know the importance of the phones in this generation. Years ago, interestingly, years ago, this wasn't even a policy years ago, right? And I guess for maybe some of the older people will understand what I'm saying. I mean, we didn't have cell phones back then. That wasn't even an issue now. But it had to make its way in the handbook. any code of conduct because it has become problematic within the workspace. And it basically says employees are expected to use their mobile phones and social media responsibly in a manner that supports productivity, professionalism, and organizational integrity. You can't just be videotaping people. I mean, we know we love these selfies and so, but you can't just be, when you're taking selfies, you are capturing inside of the workspace. Sometimes you have a lot of confidential spaces and things going on. And so you can't just be taking pictures and posting things up, videoing here and videoing there and that kind of thing. You can literally lose your job for some of these kind of things. Being on the phone, excessive phone use can be problematic in organizations. So you want to be mindful of those things. Of course, discrimination. And of course, we might say, yeah, we know that. It is an issue. Employees are expected to promote a work environment free from discrimination, harassment, victimization, and unfair treatment. Does it happen? Yes, it does. And here's why it happens. Discrimination is really action. But before you reach the action, there's a belief and a thought. You could think a particular way, that might be considered your bias. You could feel a particular way, that might be considered your prejudice, but there's no legislation around that. Nobody can tell you how to think or how to feel. That's your prerogative. But if that thinking and feeling begins to manifest itself in your behavior, that disenfranchise somebody else within your workspace, that's discrimination. And so the workplace legislation is discrimination. What you do, how you act within that space. And so we need to understand that. And of course, discrimination could include issues like sexuality, race, religious belief, political persuasion. All these things can happen. And people have their preferences. You may have a supervisor who might give preferential treatment for somebody that falls within their own belief system, or they're able to align with some other aspect of whatever it is. But if it begins to show as favoritism, if it begins to show as victimization, if you begin to feel that there's unfair treatment, then there's a case for discrimination. So you have to be mindful of that. This is an important one, fraternization. We understand sexual harassment, but I'll still want to talk just a little bit on it. And because of time, I can't go too deep in any of these. But in some organization, prohibition of romantic relationships, romantic and intimate relationship. So you start the organization, you see somebody, you're all going real good, you all start to feel for each other according to Nadia Batson, you're all catching feelings. Some organizations will say, we don't do that in this space. One of the organizations years ago I worked for, it was like that. You cannot be in a relationship with anybody within the branch. There were several branches, and if a relationship was formed within that space, you had to declare it, and then one of you going to get transferred. One of you will be transferred, but two of you cannot be in the same location and you have a relationship. That is how serious it was. So keep in mind what the policies are with respect to romantic relationships. And of course, sexual harassment, zero tolerance for sexual harassment. But it's interesting that a lot of people don't understand sexual harassment. We assume sexual harassment is just making a physical pass or saying something to somebody that they might consider sexual in nature, but that is sexual harassment as well. But there are much more subtle nuances that also would be considered sexual harassment. For example, you could look at somebody across the hall, and the way you look at that person could feel harassed. You ask somebody out and they say no, and you ask them out a second time, move on. If by the third time you come, they could begin to feel harassed. So oftentimes the action may not be with the intention to sexually harass somebody, but it could be interpreted because the action violates that particular space. So make sure and take some time to understand sexual harassment on all its forms, understand the organizational policy with respect to relationships within the workspace. All right, substance use is a big one. Employees are expected to report, and hear me clearly, report to work fit for duty and free from the influence of substances that may impair performance, judgment, safety, or professional conduct. Here's what some people think. Well, I am not drinking on the job. I'm not smoking on the job. Here's what the policy says. You're expected to report to work. So if it's Monday morning and you had a long weekend, drinking and smoking, that happened in your yard, in your house, in your own space. That is nobody's business. But on Monday morning, you come into work under the influence of some substance, problems. And in some organizations where safety is of a very high priority, like those who are in the engineering programs and so, would know that there are the drug policy is large in these organizations, and they sometimes do random testing. So you might come to work on Monday morning and realize that you have to go into the room, the nurse is waiting for you, and you have to pee in a cup or some kind of thing, and they do a test. And if you're found with certain substances within your system, that's a breach of company policy. So make sure you understand, right? Now, a concern of mine, which maybe this is not the platform for it, but I probably need to say it, a concern of mine is the substance use is becoming a little problematic within our society. And a lot of people do not understand that they do have a problem with substances. And so they think they have it together. But I'm saying, if you know you have a challenge, seek help. Get help, because it could affect you in your workspace. All the competence you have, and again, we're talking about the professional conduct. You could be the most competent person we have on the job. But if you can't hold your liquor, problems. Okay, respectful communication. Employees are expected to communicate respectfully and professionally in verbal, written, and online interactions. It might be of value if you think that this is a challenge, that you work on it. Work on the communication. In some organizations, they are very, very particular about how you speak. They may have you frontline, you represent the organization, and the way you speak. You have a little temper. You can't rough up, you can't rough up the people, customers. That's a problem, right? So be mindful how you speak. Understand written communication is also problematic. Online interactions, those things are all forms of communication. And keep in mind as well, communication is also non-verbal. Non-verbal. So your supervisor speak with you, you didn't say anything, but you show attitude in your non-verbals. That is disrespect. That could be considered insubordination. That could land you in some problems in your workspace. So just be mindful of all these things going into that space, right? All of this is part of professional conduct. Workplace safety. Every employee is responsible for contributing to workplace safety and preventing accidents, injuries, and unsafe conditions. And again, I want to emphasize with OSHA and all these things, all of us have a duty to make sure our environment is safe. And of course, workplace conflict. I've had to respond to situations where, not here, of course, I'm just giving a general statement, where there were workplace conflict. And workplace conflict is not just, I mean, physical, sometimes confrontation happens within the workspace. This has to be managed because it affects it creates reputational risks for an organization. If two employees are having a dispute and it's not managed, it could affect customer delivery. It could affect the reputation of the organization. Something happens, a fight break out on the compound, somebody gets injured. You know what's going on in newspapers? Employee of UTT. How UTT getting this? How the organization getting this, right? but that's how it's reported. So be mindful that once you represent, you're wearing even if you're wearing the uniform and you're on the street, you're in the uniform, you're representing the organization, right? So be mindful of that. Okay. So the process, we're wrapping up with this area. So we have the acquisition of knowledge, you graduate, you have a degree. That's the foundational piece, that's the knowing. As you go into work and you start to build your competence, you have your continuous learning, you're working on building your professional conduct. That's the transformative process, that's the doing. And then what we have is the developmental outcome, which is the becoming, the professional identity. So from the knowledge acquisition, leaving university to professional identity, it's still a process yet. But if we could make the mental transition, as we asked a while ago, it could then begin to manifest itself into the behaviors, the competence seeking, the building of the skill sets, and so that could eventually bring you to the place where the outcome is professional identity. All right. And when we get into the developmental plan, I will give you some steps that could help to navigate this. All right. Any questions before we move on?
Hi, sir. I have a question.
Yes, sure.
So, in terms of dealing with people in the workplace, right? Let's say you, for example, start a new job selling with the company selling goods or services, right?
Right.
And you're in the job for about 2 months now. You get comfortable with somebody, your coworkers, and you see a coworker doing something they're not supposed to be doing, right? But you're cool with them. If you understand what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
you don't want to encourage them to do what they're doing, but you don't want to have any tension in the workplace as well. So obviously the smart thing to do would be to talk to your superior, but then the aftermath of that might differ depending on how you deal with it. So I just want to know if you have any advice on how to
Right.
deal with that kind of situation.
Okay. So that's Zachary, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Zachary, I want you to hold that question. That's a very, very important question you ask. The next area we're going into really speaks specifically to that kind of a thing. And so I want us to revisit that question as we begin to explore the next section, right? Is that okay?
Yes, so not a problem.
Right. And if I miss it, just throw it back at me again, right? As we begin to explore the third section. Because I think it really covers exactly what you're asking. And thanks for the question. That's a very, very important question. Okay, is there another? Okay, no? All right. So let's move on. So the third shift, and this is where Zachary's question might come in now. Moving beyond, this is the third shift we are making, moving beyond the external influence to internal conviction. And in this area, we're developing a value-based philosophy. Value-based philosophy. Okay. So a value-based philosophy is a guiding framework that is grounded in a set of core values. Zachary's question was coming from, what are the core values of you as an individual? What are the core values of the organization? Is there alignment with those core values? And how does the incident that you described violated those core values? We'll come back to that, Zachary. So what it does, it gives us a compass, a moral compass. And a moral compass is an internal framework of values, beliefs, and principles that guides a person's decisions, their conduct, and the relationships that they keep. All right. So let's talk about this moral compass. The fundamental beliefs and principles and how we choose to live and work. Right. they serve this moral compass that we need to establish, because that is shift we are making. We're making this shift from external influence to an internal conviction. That's internal, that's the core values, that's the philosophy, the value-based philosophy that as a professional we must cultivate. It serves as an internal compass for professional conduct. And here's where Zachary's question was. Ethical decision making. That was an ethical dilemma that you just described there. And we're saying the internal compass is what guides the decisions we make when it comes to these ethical decisions, right? Okay. So organizations would take the time to establish their core values, because the core values they see as helping to shape the character of the organization. And so they would establish these core values, and they said these core values then would guide the decision-making that takes place within the organization. It would help to shape the culture of the organization. It would ask that employees be aligned, and they would even hire employees that are aligned to the cultural values of the organization. So organizations have them. And I want to just use UTT's core values as an example. And I'm not sure if many of you know that UTT also have a list of core values. It's right on our main website. Okay. And these are UTT's core values, right? Integrity, excellence, core values, inclusiveness. And mind you, it's not just taking a list of nice words and putting together. These words must be meaningful to those who would help to shape it and adopt it, and then try to have this help to shape the culture within the organizational space. Transparency is important. Collaboration, being able to work together. Commitment and respect, right? So these are the 7 core values that UTT has on their website. If you're applying for a job, I would recommend after you've done all your research, make sure within that research, try to identify what are the core values of this organization. Chances are it's on their website. That's where they would put it, because they want others to know this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is the character of our institution. They put it out there. So take some time to research and figure out what are the core values of this particular organization, all right? But we're going beyond the organizational core values, and we're saying as a professional or someone who is seeking to become professional in there and create a professional identity, you must be mindful to adopt core values of your own. A personal value-based philosophy that you hold to help to shape and guide your decision-making processes, that work to help to shape your character, how people see you, how your identity is shaped. That is part of what your core values. So it guides decision-making. So Zachary's question, I'm coming back to it in a short. Decision-making. What do I do in a case like this? It's a conflict, it's a dilemma. What decision to make? What we are saying is, if the code of ethics does not give you a clear description of what to be done, because sometimes it's within the code of ethics, if it's not within there, what does your core value, your personalized value-based philosophy say as it relates to this particular issue? That's what we're dealing with. It helps to shape the organizational culture. That's what core value do for organization, and apply it to yourself. How does it shape my own culture, my own character, the characteristics I display? It builds trust and credibility, because when I understand that integrity is a core value and you arrange your practice to ensure that there's a high level of transparency and credibility, I feel like I could trust this organization. I feel that there's a high level of credibility within this organization. And similarly, does your core value help to build, can people trust you? Because maybe a core value for you is honesty. If a core value for you is honesty, responsibility, accountability, if those are some core values you have, and you emulate, remember we said professionalism is a public declaration. Because of your open way you carry yourself and you interrelate and you work within the space, I can see those values emanating, and I can, you know what, I could trust this individual. I can trust this particular staff. I see credibility coming from you. And mind you, sometimes when you see it comes down to opportunities for advancement, it's not just technical competence, you know. Sometimes these are some of the things that managers look for in their employees. It strengthens accountability when there is a value-based philosophy. It enhances your identity and branding. We talk about your personal brand. What are your values, and how do these values help to represent the brand, your professional brand, your personal brand? How do those core values align to the professional identity that you are trying to create? Those are some questions we need to ask. It provides stability and focus for organizations and for us as individuals, because when you have shifting, things are shifting around you, it gives you a sense of stability because your values haven't changed. It also encourages professional growth and competence, and it defines your professional identity. So then I'm suggesting to us that one of the shifts we need to make is to move beyond having an external influence to guide and shape our behavior, but let there also be an internal, personal value-based philosophy, an internal compass that guides and shape your decision-making processes within the workspace. And so I'm making an appeal for us to adopt. Okay, so before I go into the developmental plan, let's talk about Zachary's. So Zachary, I'll ask you to come back on.
Yes, sir.
And so let me see if I get the question you're asking. So you have an employee who he's doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So, and wrong meaning he's clearly violating the organizational policy, right? The guidelines of the organization. There's some kind of code of ethics breach going on there, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. You see this. Is he a friend of yours? I can't remember if you said you had a relationship.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So there's a relationship there. I want to ask you though, Zachary, what core value you think is being violated there?
honesty.
Honesty, right. Now, does the organization hold honesty as a core value?
Yes.
I could almost say yes, right? And what about your internal personalized value system? Is honesty a core value you hold to?
Definitely.
Right. So your core value aligns with the core value of the organization, right?
Yeah.
So now you have to make a decision. Now, if you say this is somebody that is a friend of yours, so there are different ways you can do it, as opposed to escalating, because that's one option, escalating. As opposed to escalating, you can speak to your friend and say to him, listen, I observe so. This is a violation of the company's policy. You need to be mindful of this. This could cause some problems. If this happens again, I may be compelled to make a report. That might be one way you can look at it. Now, what some organizations will do in order to safeguard, because sometimes the person who might be violated might be somebody senior to you. It could even be a direct supervisor. And sometimes in making a report like this, it could expose you, the employee, to victimization or to some kind of backlash from it. So what some organizations try to do, and again, it's in the the policy documents, they will have a whistleblowing policy. And part of the whistleblowing policy is to allow for some kind of protection to safeguard you as the employee, seeing somebody doing something wrong and making a report that there's wrongdoing in the company. Because if you were to do that outside, and especially if it's somebody who like is senior to you, it could affect you negatively. So, you know, the whistleblowing policy is there to safeguard and to protect you. So I would say, I would find out, is there a whistleblowing policy? What kind of safeguards are there? Is it anonymous? Is it confidential if I am to file a report? That will also be an option for you. But I think the first option I will probably consider, if it's a friend of yours or somebody that you consider a colleague that you can talk to, I might point it out to that person, hey, you know, this is a concern. I see this is happening. This is a problem, you know, and you could point it out and see if there's some kind of change in behavior.
Okay. All right. Thanks, sir.
Okay, Zachary. Any other questions though? Before we move on, we're going into the last area, which is the developing of the action plan to implement these shifts and changes. So I'll take any questions at this point in time before we move on. Okay. All right, so I'm making the assumption that we are on the same page and we're okay. All right, so let's move on. The last area is developing an action plan. How do we then, in a very practical way, begin to implement these shifts that we've been talking about? How do we do that? So I'm going to suggest, this may not fit in everybody's space, but take what works within your own context and see how best you can apply it. I will send this document, this part of the session to you. You can still take your notes if you like, but it's pretty lengthy, so you're making remember everything. I'll ask Jesse if he could send this to you so you can use it, all right? It's a tool, use it as you see fit, all right? So the first area was moving beyond creating an identity to creating a brand. So in this area, there are several things I'm suggesting that we consider. And one would be to begin, this is a mental shift, begin to see yourself as a brand and protect that brand. When you see yourself as an employee, begin to see yourself even before becoming an employee, because even in the interview process, job search process, you are a brand. You are selling a product. The employer is the consumer of that product. So if you want somebody to buy your product above the other competitor, you have to present yourself in a particular way. And if you haven't made that mental shift, chances are your action and your behavior may not necessarily put you in the advantageous position to differentiate yourself from the competitors. I hope I'm making sense. So I'm suggesting it begin with a mental shift. Start to see yourself as a brand. You are a company, you are a brand, the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, all those things are part of that brand. Your online presence, that's part of your brand. See yourself as a brand that you want consumers to purchase, consumers being the organization, the employer, and you have to take all steps to protect that brand. So your reputation, how do people see you? How do people talk about you? When your name comes up, what do people think of? And let's be honest, sometimes we may not have done right. You know, you're the guy always missing class. You're the guy always, you know, sometimes we've built a reputation for ourselves. You could change that. This is your chance to say, okay, you know what? I want to change people's image of me. I don't want to be known as the class clown. I want to be known as the person who could sit down and have an intelligent conversation about something. I want to be known as the person who is loyal, who is respectful, values. who adopt certain strong principles, and I live these principles. So that's your brand. So see yourself as a brand, protect the brand. I'm suggesting write a personal mission statement for your personal brand. So think about the brand, think about how you want to present yourself, what you want to look like, how you want to come across to people, and write a mission statement. All companies have a mission statement. Again, see yourself as a company, you are that brand. What's your mission statement? To be the best, to be, think about it, write it. Build a professional portfolio showcasing your achievement. So somebody asked earlier, should I create an online presence? Well, if you have to showcase your achievement and build a professional portfolio, nobody's seeing you if you're not online, But if you're on LinkedIn and you have these other platforms you could be a part of and you build a professional portfolio, you are putting your professional self out there. Organizations will see you. People will be able to say, okay, this look like a potential candidate. So you have to market yourself. And one of the ways of marketing yourself is through the online platforms. So build your portfolio, showcasing your achievements. You're doing things, you're creating, you're making things happen. Put it up there. Put it up there, right? Get a professional headshot for your professional portfolio. It can't be a selfie, right? Don't pop up. I know it costs. I really do. I know it costs. But if you can, sometimes you may have a friend with a decent enough camera who could do it. That's fine as well. You don't necessarily have to go to a studio, but try to get a proper background as best as you could and get a decent professional headshot so that you can use for a professional portfolio. Where possible, find a mentor in the field. That might be a lecturer that you really want to emulate. It can be formal, it can be informal. Formal mentorship is a little more rare, tend to be a little more informal, but it's all based on relationship. So if you do know somebody who's senior in the field, again, you have relationships with some of your lecturers, that might be something you want to consider. If you feel that they are people you can emulate, you want to find somebody who understands the field. Maybe when you get into the field, it might be a senior person on the job, might be a supervisor, somebody who, you're seeing qualities in them that you want to emulate. These are people you could kind of shadow as well. So again, it could be informal. Practice professional communication and etiquette. If it's not something that comes natural to you, maybe you need to literally practice it. Sometimes just the way we speak may not come across very professional. And so we want to be mindful of the little nuances that comes out in our speech that we might want to change. Be mindful of language. I remember there was a time I would be learning new words. And I still do it. If I come across a new word, I'll say, what is that word? And I'll write it down and look it up. Because learning doesn't end. And as you get into a professional space, you probably want to be able to use professional language. Then etiquette, how you send an email, what are the rules regarding emails and communication? What about nonverbal communication? So practice it, right? Adjust your wardrobe to match your professional identity that you want to be. Now, I know that's costly. I'm not saying just throw out everything and change your wardrobe. At the very least, make sure you have clothes that you can use for an interview. That's a start. We talked about some of the things. Make sure you can identify some of those and have those at least within your wardrobe, so you can be prepared if an interview comes up impromptu. I have what I need to be able to go and attend the interview. But I'm asking to go beyond the interview. And again, if we think of ourselves as a brand, think about your professional identity. When you go out there, you represent your brand. So to be mindful of that. Be mindful of the types of I think I should say it. Be mindful of the type of images you have on your clothing. You know, I struggle with these jerseys and pants with all the marijuana leaves on them. I mean, if you smoke marijuana, that's your business, but you don't have to wear the clothes with the big. I don't know, is it just me? But I'm thinking, what does that say about your professional brand? And again, if we make the mental shift and begin to see ourselves as a professional brand, is that the image I want to emulate walking through wherever I'm going? Because people see me as representing my professional brand. Now, some can argue, and it's okay if you have an opposing view. Some could say, well, no, that's my business. I could wear what I want to wear, what I wear, and that's true. That is true. But just be mindful that what you do and how you dress and how you carry yourself, it gives an image of you and it affects your professional brand. Just keep that in mind. Nobody's saying you can't do it, you shouldn't do it. But if you do it, know that it's giving an image of you. Certain prints, you probably want to stay away from. If there's a print that objectifies women or is discriminatory in some way, why are you wearing a t-shirt with that on it? You know, do you hold to those values that your jersey is saying? Is that part of your value system that you hold to? Even if you don't, it gives the impression that you do because you are wearing the t-shirt, right? Just keep that in mind, right? Build positive relations and forge alliances that are aligned with your professional brand. What it simply means by that, I'm not saying, I'm saying expand your network, your social network. Forge alliance. If you're in the engineering field, you probably want to start to forge some alliances with people in the field because it gives you an opportunity to grow. It gives you an opportunity to have an ear on the ground to hear where there are opportunities coming. You know, these are some possibilities that might be there. I would suggest to you, form alliances. It's part of your brand. Alliances in branding is always something that happens. So I would do that. Maintain professionalism online. We spoke about that, but I'll go a step further and say audit your social media presence. And I would say monthly. People send things to you from time to time. You know, make sure you don't just resend. There's some things you probably want to delete and not keep on your on your social media because you're trying to keep a clean professional space, but people might be sending you things. I'm just saying, be mindful to audit and make sure that you're mindful of that presence online. Manage your brand reputation online and offline. All right? That's what I'm saying there. Okay, so that's it for this one. Let's move on to the next. Any questions so far? We good? Okay. So the second shift we were making, we said moving beyond knowing to being, and that's where we're developing a professional identity. And I'm saying here, the mental shift is to accept that knowledge acquisition through the completion of your study, that's the knowing part, is just the beginning for the transformative process, which is the doing part. So don't walk out with your degree thinking, okay, I'm finished. You have only just begun. You have to begin to see it. We're moving from knowing now to being. You're becoming. See the mental shift and understand that the application of the knowledge is the transformative process that helps in the development of that professional identity, the being the professional, the consummate professional. Develop transferable skills that would be useful in your field. Again, transferable skills could be some softer skills. Example, communication skills, teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking. These are not things that might be a requirement for a job, but trust me, you having these skills, especially if you have some kind of certificate of participation, it goes a long way because employers will see that, you know what, this is somebody who took some time for personal and professional development. These are skills, regardless of what field you're in, you're going to need because there will be interaction with others. So you need communication skills. You have to work within a team. You're going to have problems to solve. You're going to have to think critically. And these are just some examples. Strengthen the gaps in your knowledge within your chosen field. So here's what I'm saying here, right? And I'm going back to the textbook with the 30 chapters, and you've only read 10. But guess what? You graduate, you get a degree, you pass the subject. You put down the book. Why? If there are 20 chapters that I have not read, then isn't that a gap in your profession, in your knowledge? Are you understand what I'm saying? Now, you wouldn't think that way if you stop where you are. You know, knowing is sufficient. I have my certification. I can move on. I don't have to look back again. But if you're beginning to move beyond that and beginning and start seeing yourself as becoming a professional, then I need to know what's in them other 20 chapters. I may have to revisit the text. There's some courses I might have struggled with and I get a bare pass. Maybe I want to revisit because that might be information I would need in my competence on the ground, in the field. So if I was unfamiliar with them, with those areas during my studies, I need to revisit that. Okay? Identify the gaps in your knowledge. Now, the good thing is you don't have any exam, you have no pressure, so you could relax. Right? You had to cram, forget the cramming. I could sit down, structure myself now, and read and try to understand. Oh, that's what Miss was trying to say. You know, I didn't get that when in class. Right? You're expanding your competence, you're filling in the knowledge gaps, which you're going to need to build your competence in the field. Stay current within the industry, with industry trends, and developments. For most of the degrees, you have professional organizations that continue to have journals and review articles and publications. Take time to read them. If you're in education, what is the newest thing that's happening in education? What are some of the research saying on child development? What is the research saying on learning in the classroom? Find out. Take some time to read. The information is being published. If you're in engineering, what is the research saying on this particular field? In utilities, in mechanical engineering, what is it saying out there? What are the new trends? You have to stay current. Again, you wouldn't do this if you just stop with your degree and I don't know, I have my certification. But if you are becoming, you want to stay cutting edge. You want to be professional. And so this interests me to know. All right. Engage in self-directed study for continuous learning development. We talked about that. There are lots of stuff out there in any field. You have other people talking about their experiences, sharing skills, sharing knowledge online. You have TED Talks, you have podcasts, you have so much. If you don't feel like reading, you can listen to something out there. But take some time for continuous learning and development. Attend workshops, webinars, conferences in your field. Find out what's happening. And you'll be surprised that oftentimes you have quite a number of free webinars. Not just locally, but also internationally. There are free webinars all the time that you can log into and be a part of, sharpen your skills, get some information. Very important, join a professional association related to your area of discipline, local or international. And the reason why I say international is because sometimes we don't have it locally. We may not have an association that covers your particular field. Maybe we do, and if we do, be a part of it. But if we don't, you may want to look at what the Caribbean have. Maybe there is something in the Caribbean Association of Engineers or whatever the area, designers, or internationally. Join the associations Be a part of it. And what the associations will do, just for by way of information, you get magazines, journals, not magazines, rather, journals. You get their journals with all the research. So being a part of these professional associations, they feed you with all the updated information and research within the field. So that's really great as well. So you get 2 for 1 right there. Volunteer for projects through non-profit organization, NGOs, non-governmental organizations. I think I had that wrong there, but you understand what I mean. Faith-based organizations. You can be a part of some of these volunteer groups where you can lend your skills, you can work with teams. And I want to just point you back to one of our sessions we had earlier. Miss Maxwell had mentioned in the interview process, if you had done stuff, you worked with government organizations, non-government organizations, you were part of sports clubs, these things are valuable. You work with your Rotary Club, you did volunteering work. It shows your ability to work within teams, and those things are actually considered when you sit for your interview. And sometimes, especially if you hadn't had much experience, you may be asked an interview question that you may not have had a work experience to really answer the question. But having worked within some of these organizations, you might come across difficult situations that you have negotiated and navigated. And so you can share how you dealt with conflict or how you manage a situation within that space. And that will suffice in an interview setting. Plus, of course, you develop the skills necessary for the workspace. Accept leadership positions if offered. Most people, nah, I don't want to. It actually goes a long way on your resume. It shows up that this is somebody who is open for leadership. It kind of gives a good indication, because when opportunities for promotion comes up, it shows that this is somebody who is open for mobility and for positive growth and development. It kind of sends a positive signal, right? So you can do it within a professional or a community-based organization. Right within your neighborhood, maybe there's some kind of community group you could be a part of. I'm just saying, look and see what's out there. Seize every opportunity to add value beyond the minimum requirements of employers. Because the average person probably coming with a degree, and that might be the minimum requirement. Again, one position, 50 applications. All of you have the same degree. I have to start to differentiate now. So all of you have the same degree, which is the minimum. I am looking for the add-on value. Okay, this person could actually speak Spanish. Now, what does Spanish have to do with anything? Well, chances are, as an engineer, we have a platform that, we have in Spain, and from time to time, we might be looking for, who knows what opportunities. There may be things that you don't consider really valuable, but could be a valuable add-on that sets you apart from other people who have the same qualifications that you do. So again, seize every opportunity to add value beyond the minimum requirement. All right. Okay, that's the second shift we're making. Any questions on those? We're going to go to the last one and then we wrap. No questions? We're still there though, right? Just checking. Right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir. We're
Okay.
still
Still
here.
here.
We're still here.
Right. Just checking. I'm just talking to myself, right? Okay, good. All right. So the third and last area, right? The third and last area we talked about was moving beyond external influence to internal conviction. You need, as a professional, an internal conviction. You need to establish a value-based philosophy. So I'm starting by saying, write out a personal philosophy to guide your professional identity. What is your personal philosophy? Give that some thought. You may have to sit with that for a while, because maybe it might be an answer you could just come up with immediately. But sit with it for a while. What is my personal philosophy? Because there must be some guiding principle to help to shape this professional identity you want to create. So think about that for a while. Define what kind of professional identity you want to be known for. You know, we leave in school now, so maybe if you were the class clown, if you were this, if you were that, that's school days. But now I'm changing my outlook on life. I don't want to be known as that in the workspace. I don't want to go in the workspace to be the clown in work. I want to go in there as the man they know who's responsible. I want to go in there and know my colleagues, they could depend on me. I want my customers to know when you put your hands on something, they know it's done well and with excellence. That's the identity I want to be known for. So write that down. Define what kind of professional identity you want to be known for. Write out what impact you want your work to have on others. Whatever type of area of study you're in, what kind of impact you want to have on your customers, on the profession as a whole. Remember, we say as a professional, you are representing the entire profession, whatever profession that might be. You are representing the entire profession. What impact you want to have on the profession? Think about that. Those are some deep thoughts. Again, you may not have the answers to any of these questions right away, right? It's a process, but it's part of the process for us to build that internal conviction, right? List the values and traits that you admire in others and say why. You know, they might be friends, they might be people that you associate with, and you see some traits that you find, you know what, I like this trait, and say why, you know, and then make a list of them. You're just making a list of those traits, right? Write down 10 to 15 possible values, because we're talking about value-based philosophy now. We are creating that moral compass. Write down about 10 to 15 possible values. Don't just adopt it from anywhere, right? It may not relate directly with your own principles. So write down about 10 to 15 possible values. Group them, the similar ones together, because you might have some that are very similar, you can group them. And as you go through them, you want to define what each of them mean to you. So like we talk about honesty. What does honesty mean to you? You know what? You don't like people to be dishonest to you. You feel disrespected, you feel this way. And so honesty is a very important policy for me. I want people to be honest with me, and I want to be honest with others. I want to be able to trust others. If you're dishonest, I can't trust you. I want people to be able to trust me. So, right, what does that value mean to you in behavioral terms? How it impacts you, okay? And then we want to prioritize these values in order of importance. Now, they're all important, right? They're all important, I'm sure. But there might be some that just stand out more than others. And so see if you could just put them in some kind of order of priority, and where possible, narrow them down to about 5 to 7 core values. Because really, we started with 15, right? We said look for 10 to 15 values. Too much. See if you can narrow it down, prioritize them, and then say, okay, see these 5, these 7. UTT has 7. Other organization may have 6. Some may have 8. Most times no more than 10. See if you could narrow them down and say, okay, I am going to start now to look closely at these core values, right? Turn these core values now into daily behaviors to be intentionally lived out. And I emphasize the word intentionally. So if the core value is being trustworthy, let's use that as an example. If that's a core value I want to emulate, how could I live that out in my daily life? Well, guess what? Your parents, because some of you probably still at home, your parents ask you to do something. Could they depend on you if they give you a task? That's trustworthiness. So maybe even in my home, I could emulate that value. Remember, it's about becoming, right? I could emulate that value in my home. Honesty is something I really want to make a greater effort to be more truthful in what I do and what I say, how I interact with others. I'm really going to make respect is a core value. So you know what? I'm really making an effort to be respectful to other people. I don't like to be disrespected. I'm not going to disrespect others. So again, turn these into daily behaviors. How could I live this out? Be intentional about it. Write out how you can live out each value in your personal and professional life, right? Review these values monthly to assess if your behavior is aligned. Did you act according to those values? In fact, chances are you might find episodes where you didn't abide by those values. Where did you compromise? Why did you compromise? What was the circumstance around? Maybe I felt threatened, so I lied because I felt I need to protect myself from harm. What are the situations around the violation of those core values? These are things you want to probably look at. Right? And the last thing, and this is my last slide, the last thing I want to say to you is make a personal commitment. And again, I'm going to send this to you. It's not binding. You're making this commitment with your future self. All right. So that's between you and you in the future. So you're saying, I hereby make this commitment with my future self to do the above activities with the goal of building technical and professional competence, defining my professional brand, forging a professional identity, and adopting a value-based philosophy that will serve as a moral compass throughout my professional career. That's the commitment you are making with your future self. All right, and my last slide is a quote from Albert Einstein. The value of a college education is not the learning of many facts, but the training of the mind to think. So go beyond the institution at this point and allow your mind to grow and allow your professional expertise to develop and become that consummate professional that will make the industry proud, will make the institution proud. All right, so thank you. I hope this was beneficial. I'll take any questions at this time. Right, I see Tisha.
Yes, sir. With regards to the values that you were speaking about, so you said to write down about 10 to 15 possible values and then group them. Is there like a particular way, categories, how do we know? Because there are so many.
Right, yeah. So we start by looking at, like I said, people that you probably emulate. What are some of the values that they hold to? Maybe your parents, maybe people that you look up to. What are some of the values that stand out? And you could just make a comprehensive list. You could go online, make a list of personal values. But after you make the list, then you want to see which of these that I could personally relate to. Now, again, all the values may make sense and may be valuable, but you want to prioritize them because some of them may not be something that totally aligns with your personality or with, your own philosophy as well. So you want to then narrow it down. So there's no real step one stage to how you do it. Rather than make the list, go through them, prioritize them, but more importantly, ask yourself, how do these relate to you? What is your connection with these things? Because you want it to be an internal process we are engaged in, right? So you want to be able to connect with those core values. And then we work from there following these steps. I hope this was helpful, right? Question? Okay. All right, Shanice. Hope I pronounce it correct.
What would you say is one of the biggest hindrances to professional development, and how would you advise to overcome it?
Right. I think, and that's why I took a different approach with this session. I think one of the biggest hindrances is that we see professional development more as a list of things we need to do. And yes, there are things we need to do. So we say, okay, and I did give some. So professional development, you have to dress a particular way, you have to talk a particular way, you have all these things to do. But I really try to emphasize going beyond the doing. My emphasis really was making the mental shift. I feel if we could make the mental shift, the rest becomes easier. The doing becomes easy because the doing comes out of the way we think, the way we perceive something. And if we could make the mental shift, so for example, like we shared, if I see myself as a brand, I don't need to have to check off a list again. Already I need to think about, okay, if I am a brand, I have to preserve this brand. How does this particular incident negatively impact my brand? Immediately you start thinking differently. Immediately you start to manage your actions differently. You make, excuse me, different decisions. Because all of this now is not coming from a list of activities to do to become a professional, but it's changing the way you think. You're beginning to think like a professional. You begin to think about values, understand that these are the values that help to shape who we become. So you're trying to embrace these things. So I'm saying to you, I feel that one of the biggest challenges is that it's oftentimes approached from a list of activities, and I'm not despising the activities. We need to do the activities as well. But I feel beyond the activities, we need to make the mental change. If we understand the change and why we are doing this, it helps us now to internalize that. And then the action becomes easier in terms of becoming the professional. I hope that answered the question you asked.
Yes, so thank you.
All right. Is there another question? No? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I really want to thank you for taking the time. I know it was a lot of information. I hope it was helpful. And I hope it was
Indeed was, the information was very helpful, so thank you.
thank you for that. And I hope that we're able to be applicative, because at the end of the day, you don't just want information. You really want stuff that you could take and apply and really make a change. I really wish all of you the best as you enter into your career. And I really hope with all my heart that we really take, what we've talked about in a real serious way and begin to make the implementation, because I see it as so transformative. I see it as really bringing about the kind of changes that, to me, will begin the differentiating process. People will start to see differences in you. Your friends may see certain changes in you because it changes in the way you think. And if you could change the way you think, it will manifest itself in the way you behave, the things you do, the decisions you make. So I wish you the best. Remember, next week, Thursday, we have the career fair. I really encourage all of you to come on out, be a part of it. There are going to be loads of information, the mock interviews. If you haven't signed up yet for it, I recommend you do. If for nothing else, just for the practice of doing it, please sign up for it. The resume writing, there's going to be a clinic. Come and be a part, all right? So I hand you over to Jesse. And that document from all these steps, I'll have Jesse send those things to you. Maybe by tomorrow, please, God, right? Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenaway. A lot of information, a lot of information, and what a great way to bring a climax and an end to our career enhancement series. So guys, as Dr. Greenaway would have said, the 9th of July, we are inviting each and every one of you all to come out and be a part of the career/job fair. Yes, Dr. Greenaway will be there. Myself will be there. We're going to have close to 50 companies who's going to be there. If you want to be part of these speed interviews and the mock interviews, you have to register. If not, you can just show up and present
Excuse me,
yourself.
sir.
Yes.
Where are we registering?
Oh, the link was sent. I could put it in the group again. If not, at the end of the session, I intend to send an email, a final email to all participants with the recording and also inviting members to register. But I can put the link in the chat once more, so that should not be a problem. Right, so that the 9th of July. And again, I encourage each and every one of you guys to really come out and be a part of it. So let me put the link one time before so it's in the group there. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Greenaway, and thank you to each and every one of you who took time out to be a part of this informative session. And I do hope to see you guys on the 9th of July. Do enjoy the rest of the night and keep safe.